The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand halls of Kensington Palace as Prince William walked quietly through the corridors that had become his home. His footsteps echoed softly on the polished marble floors, while servants moved silently around him preparing for another day of royal duties. The palace felt peaceful in these early hours before the world would demand his attention once again. Catherine was already awake in their private sitting room, reading through the morning correspondence that arrived daily in neat stacks. She wore a simple cream-colored sweater and her hair fell loosely around her shoulders as she carefully opened each envelope with the palace letter opener that had been used by generations before them. The morning light streaming through the tall windows made her look almost angelic as she concentrated on her task. William joined her with a cup of tea and settled into the chair across from her. They had developed this quiet routine over the years, where they would start each day together reviewing their schedules and discussing the events that lay ahead. It was one of the few times they could be completely themselves without cameras or crowds watching their every move. Catherine looked up from a particularly thick envelope and smiled at her husband. The envelope was different from the usual correspondence they received. It was heavier and bore an official seal from St. Mary's Children's Hospital. She had seen many such invitations before, but something about this one felt different, though she could not explain why. She opened the envelope carefully and began reading the formal invitation inside. The hospital was opening a new wing dedicated to treating children with serious heart conditions, and they wanted the royal couple to attend the opening ceremony. The letter explained how the new facility would help hundreds of children each year and provide hope to families facing their darkest moments. William read over her shoulder as Catherine held the invitation between them. The hospital director had written a personal note explaining how much the visit would mean to the children and their families. She described how the young patients had been talking about the royal visit for weeks and how it had given them something positive to look forward to during their difficult treatments. Catherine felt something stir in her heart as she read about the children who would be there. She had always felt drawn to helping children, but there was something about this particular invitation that seemed to call to her more deeply than usual. She looked at William and could see in his eyes that he felt the same pull toward this event. They had attended many hospital openings and charity events over the years. It was part of their royal duties and something they both took seriously. But this invitation felt different somehow. Neither of them could explain why, but they both sensed that this visit would be more meaningful than their usual ceremonial appearances. William studied the details of the event, while Catherine continued reading about the hospital and its mission. The new wing would house children from all over the country who needed specialized heart surgery and treatment. Many of these children would be staying at the hospital for months while they waited for operations or recovered from procedures. Catherine set down the invitation and looked out the window at the gardens beyond. She imagined the children who were probably looking out hospital windows right now, hoping for good news about their health. The thought of their courage and hope in the face of such serious illnesses moved her deeply. William reached over and took her hand, understanding the emotions she was feeling without needing words. They had both learned over the years that their royal position gave them the power to bring joy and hope to people during their most difficult times. It was a responsibility they never took lightly. As they sat together in the quiet morning light, neither of them could have imagined that this simple invitation would lead to one of the most emotional and life-changing experiences of their lives. The golden envelope that had arrived so quietly that morning contained more than just a formal request for their presence. It held the key to a day that would touch their hearts in ways they never expected and change how they viewed their role as members of the royal family forever. Catherine folded the invitation carefully and placed it back in its envelope, knowing that they would accept this invitation, and that somehow this visit would be different from all the others they had made before. The black royal car moved smoothly through the busy London streets as William and Catherine sat quietly in the back seat. Both of them were dressed carefully for the occasion. William wore his best navy blue suit with a crisp white shirt and his favorite tie that Catherine had given him for their anniversary. Catherine had chosen a beautiful powder blue coat that brought out the color of her eyes and made her look both elegant and approachable. As they got closer to St. Mary's Children's Hospital, Catherine felt her heart beating faster with anticipation. She had been thinking about this visit all week and wondering what they would find when they arrived. William noticed her nervousness and reached over to squeeze her hand gently. They had learned to support each other through all kinds of royal events, but somehow this one felt more important than usual. Through the car windows they could see crowds of people gathering outside the hospital entrance. There were families with children holding small British flags and hospital staff members wearing their best uniforms. Some people had been waiting for hours just to catch a glimpse of the royal couple as they arrived. The excitement in the air was obvious even from inside the car. The car pulled up to the main entrance where a red carpet had been laid out leading to the hospital doors. Security guards stood at attention while photographers and reporters waited behind barriers hoping to capture the perfect shot. William and Catherine had experienced this kind of arrival hundreds of times, but they never got completely used to all the attention and cameras. William stepped out of the car first and immediately smiled and waved to the waiting crowd. The people cheered and called out greetings while children held up signs welcoming the royal visitors. Catherine emerged from the car gracefully, and the crowd grew even more excited to see her. She waved warmly to everyone, and her genuine smile made people feel like she was personally greeting each of them. Sarah Mitchell, a hospital director, walked forward to greet them officially. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back neatly. She had been working at the hospital for over 20 years and had seen many important visitors, but having royalty come to see her patients was still very special to her. She curtsied slightly and welcomed them both with obvious pride and nervousness. As they walked toward the hospital entrance, Catherine noticed the beautiful flower arrangements that had been placed along the pathway. The hospital staff had clearly worked very hard to make everything look perfect for their visit. She could see faces pressed against the hospital windows above them as patients and their families tried to get a look at the royal guests. The hospital doors opened to reveal a completely transformed entrance hall. Colorful balloons and banners hung from the ceiling while the walls were covered with artwork created by the young patients. Each drawing showed something different. Some were pictures of families and homes, while others showed dreams of becoming doctors or teachers or astronauts when the children grew up. Catherine stopped to look more closely at the artwork and was amazed by the creativity and hope she saw in every piece. One drawing showed a little girl in a hospital bed surrounded by flowers and sunshine. Another picture showed a boy playing football with the words, "I will be strong again," written in crayon at the bottom. The artwork told stories of courage and dreams that refused to die, even in the face of serious illness. William joined her in looking at the drawings, and both of them were moved by what they saw. The hospital staff watched quietly as the royal couple took time to really look at and appreciate what the children had created. Dr. Mitchell explained that the art therapy program was very important for helping the young patients express their feelings and maintain hope during their treatment. As they continued into the hospital, Catherine felt overwhelmed by the atmosphere of love and determination that surrounded them. This was clearly more than just a medical facility. It was a place where miracles happened every day through the combined efforts of dedicated staff members and incredibly brave children and families. Dr. Mitchell led William and Catherine down a bright hallway decorated with cheerful paintings of rainbows and animals. The floors were polished to a shine, and everything smelled clean and fresh, like a place where healing happened every day. Nurses in colorful scrubs walked by pushing medical equipment while trying to catch glimpses of the royal visitors who had come to see their special patients. Their first stop was the cancer treatment ward, where some of the hospital's bravest young fighters were spending their days getting medicine to help them get better. Dr. Mitchell explained quietly that many of these children had been living at the hospital for weeks or even months while they received treatment. Some had lost their hair from the strong medicines, but their spirits remained bright and hopeful. They entered a large playroom, filled with natural light from big windows overlooking a garden. The room was painted in soft yellow and had comfortable chairs scattered around low tables where children could play games or work on art projects. Toy boxes lined the walls, and bookshelves held hundreds of colorful storybooks that volunteers read to the patients every day. Several children were sitting at a round table working on paintings with a kind art therapist who helped them express their feelings through colors and shapes. When the children saw William and Catherine enter the room, their faces lit up with excitement and curiosity. They had been told that special visitors were coming, but seeing real royalty in person was still amazing to them. 7-year-old Emma was the first to approach them with confidence that surprised all the adults in the room. She had lost all her hair from treatment, but wore a bright pink bandana decorated with silver stars that sparkled when she moved her head. Her eyes were huge and brown and full of life, despite everything she had been through during her illness. Emma walked right up to William and held out her small hand to shake his much larger one. She looked up at him seriously and said hello in a clear voice that made everyone in the room smile. William knelt down to her level so they could talk face to face and asked her about the beautiful painting she had been working on when they arrived. The painting showed a magnificent rainbow stretching across a blue sky above a green field full of flowers. Emma explained proudly that each color in her rainbow represented a different wish she had for other children who were sick like her. Red was for courage, orange was for happiness, yellow was for hope, green was for healing, blue was for peace, and purple was for dreams coming true. Catherine knelt down beside William and listened carefully to Emma's explanation of her artwork. She was amazed by the wisdom and thoughtfulness this little girl showed in thinking about other children, even while she was fighting her own battle with cancer. Emma's selflessness and hope touched Catherine's heart in a way she had not expected. Other children began gathering around them, eager to share their own stories and show their artwork. There was 10-year-old Marcus, who had painted a picture of himself playing soccer again after he got better. 8-year-old Sophie showed them a drawing of her family having a picnic in the park, like they used to do before she got sick. Each child had created something that represented their dreams and hopes for the future. The children talked openly about their treatments and their feelings without any fear or self-pity. They spoke about being brave during scary procedures and about missing their friends at school. They talked about wanting to go home and sleep in their own beds again, but also about the friends they had made at the hospital who understood what they were going through. William and Catherine found themselves sitting on the floor with the children gathered around them in a circle. The formal nature of their royal visit had disappeared as they became completely absorbed in listening to these amazing young people share their experiences. The children's honesty and courage made both William and Catherine realize they were in the presence of true heroes who happened to be very small and very sick, but incredibly strong in spirit. Der Mitchell led William and Catherine down a bright hallway decorated with cheerful paintings of rainbows and animals. The floors were polished to a shine, and everything smelled clean and fresh, like a place where healing happened every day. Nurses in colorful scrubs walked by pushing medical equipment while trying to catch glimpses of the royal visitors who had come to see their special patients. Their first stop was the cancer treatment ward, where some of the hospital's bravest young fighters were spending their days getting medicine to help them get better. Der Mitchell explained quietly that many of these children had been living at the hospital for weeks or even months while they received treatment. Some had lost their hair from the strong medicines, but their spirits remained bright and hopeful. They entered a large playroom filled with natural light from big windows overlooking a garden. The room was painted in soft yellow and had comfortable chairs scattered around low tables where children could play games or work on art projects. Toy boxes lined the walls, and bookshelves held hundreds of colorful storybooks that volunteers read to the patients every day. Several children were sitting at a round table working on paintings with a kind art therapist who helped them express their feelings through colors and shapes. When the children saw William and Catherine enter the room, their faces lit up with excitement and curiosity. They had been told that special visitors were coming, but seeing real royalty in person was still amazing to them. 7-year-old Emma was the first to approach them with confidence that surprised all the adults in the room. She had lost all her hair from treatment, but wore a bright pink bandana decorated with silver stars that sparkled when she moved her head. Her eyes were huge and brown and full of life despite everything she had been through during her illness. Emma walked right up to William and held out her small hand to shake his much larger one. She looked up at him seriously and said hello in a clear voice that made everyone in the room smile. William knelt down to her level so they could talk face to face and asked her about the beautiful painting she had been working on when they arrived. The painting showed a magnificent rainbow stretching across a blue sky above a green field full of flowers. Emma explained proudly that each color in her rainbow represented a different wish she had for other children who were sick like her. Red was for courage, orange was for happiness, yellow was for hope, green was for healing, blue was for peace, and purple was for dreams coming true. Catherine knelt down beside William and listened carefully to Emma's explanation of her artwork. She was amazed by the wisdom and thoughtfulness this little girl showed in thinking about other children, even while she was fighting her own battle with cancer. Emma's selflessness and hope touched Catherine's heart in a way she had not expected. Other children began gathering around them, eager to share their own stories and show their artwork. There was 10-year-old Marcus who had painted a picture of himself playing soccer again after he got better. 8-year-old Sophie showed them a drawing of her family having a picnic in the park, like they used to do before she got sick. Each child had created something that represented their dreams and hopes for the future. The children talked openly about their treatments and their feelings without any fear or self-pity. They spoke about being brave during scary procedures and about missing their friends at school. They talked about wanting to go home and sleep in their own beds again, but also about the friends they had made at the hospital who understood what they were going through. William and Catherine found themselves sitting on the floor with the children gathered around them in a circle. The formal nature of their royal visit had disappeared as they became completely absorbed in listening to these amazing young people share their experiences. The children's honesty and courage made both William and Catherine realize they were in the presence of true heroes who happened to be very small and very sick, but incredibly strong in spirit. After spending time in the cancer ward, Dr. Mitchell guided William and Catherine to a different part of the hospital where children with heart problems receive specialized care. The cardiac unit was quieter than the playroom they had just left, but no less filled with hope and determination. The walls here were painted with soft blue clouds and flying birds that seemed to dance across the ceiling. As they walked down the hallway, Catherine noticed how the nurses moved with extra gentleness around these patients. Children with heart conditions needed very careful monitoring, and their families often lived with constant worry about their loved ones. The stress showed on the faces of parents who had been staying at the hospital for weeks or months while their children waited for treatment. They stopped outside a room where a small boy was sitting up in bed surrounded by what looked like hundreds of tiny toy cars arranged in neat rows on his bedside table. The cars were every color imaginable and ranged from race cars to fire trucks to police vehicles. Each one was positioned carefully as if they were part of an important display that meant everything to their young owner. Dr. Mitchell knocked softly on the door and introduced 5-year-old James to his royal visitors. James had been waiting for a heart transplant for over a year and had spent most of that time living at the hospital with his parents Mark and Lisa, taking turns staying with him around the clock. The family had basically moved their entire life into this small hospital room. James looked tiny in the big hospital bed, but his face immediately brightened when he saw William and Catherine enter his room. He had been told that special visitors were coming, but he could hardly believe that real princes and princesses were standing right there in front of him. His eyes grew wide with wonder and excitement as he tried to sit up straighter in bed. His parents Mark and Lisa stood up from their chairs where they had been keeping their constant vigil beside their son. They looked exhausted from months of worry and sleepless nights, but they smiled warmly at the royal couple. Lisa had tears in her eyes as she watched her son's face light up with pure joy for the first time in weeks. James immediately wanted to show William and Catherine his collection of toy cars that had been gifts from family friends and hospital staff over the long months of his stay. He began explaining each car with the enthusiasm that only a 5-year-old could have. There was a red Ferrari that could go super fast, a yellow taxi cab like the ones in New York City, and a green army truck that could carry soldiers into battle. William sat carefully on the edge of the hospital bed, being mindful of all the medical equipment that surrounded James. He listened with genuine interest as James told him about each car and made up stories about where they had come from and what adventures they had been on. Catherine pulled up a chair close to the bed so she could see the cars better and hear every word James said. The little boy's parents watched with grateful hearts as their son forgot about being sick for a few precious minutes. They had not seen him this animated and happy in a very long time. The royal couple was giving James something that no medicine could provide: pure joy and the feeling that he was important and special. James continued showing his cars while his parents quietly told William and Catherine about their long journey with their son's illness. They explained how James had been born with a serious heart defect that would require a transplant to save his life. They had been waiting for a matching donor heart for over a year, while watching their little boy grow weaker despite the best medical care available. The emotion in the room was so thick that everyone could feel it pressing down on them like a heavy blanket. William sat on the edge of James's hospital bed, trying to find more words to comfort this brave little boy who had just asked him the most heartbreaking question he had ever heard. His royal training had prepared him for many difficult situations, but nothing could have prepared him for the pure innocence of a sick child's dreams. William's voice continued to tremble as he spoke to James about what it really meant to be brave and strong. He told the little boy that real princes were not made by wearing crowns or living in castles, but by having kind hearts and never giving up even when things were very hard. He explained that James had already shown more courage in his young life than most people show in their entire lifetimes. Catherine watched her husband struggle with his emotions and felt her own heart breaking into pieces. She had seen William handle difficult royal duties before, but she had never seen him so affected by anything. The tears that had started in her eyes now flowed freely down her cheeks as she realized that this visit was changing both of them in ways they had never expected. James listened carefully to everything William told him and nodded seriously as if he understood that these were very important words. Then he looked at Catherine with her tears and asked her why she was sad when this was supposed to be a happy day, because the prince and princess had come to visit him. His concern for Catherine's feelings, even while he was the one lying in a hospital bed, showed the kind of person this little boy was. Catherine squeezed James's hand gently and tried to explain through her tears that sometimes people cry when they are very proud of someone, and not because they are sad. She told him that she was crying because she was so amazed by how brave and wonderful he was. She said that meeting him had made her feel very lucky and very humble at the same time. The little boy seemed satisfied with her explanation and went back to arranging his toy cars, while the adults in the room continued to struggle with their emotions. His parents, Mark and Lisa, had moved to the far corner of the room where they held each other and cried quietly. They were overwhelmed by the kindness that William and Catherine were showing their son, and by seeing how their little boy was touching the hearts of these important people. Ter Mitchell stepped forward and quietly suggested that perhaps they should move on to visit other patients, but William shook his head and said they were not ready to leave James yet. He wanted to spend more time with this remarkable child who had already taught him so much about what really mattered in life. Catherine agreed and pulled her chair even closer to the bed. James showed them more of his cars and told them stories about the adventures each one had been on. He had created an entire imaginary world where his cars went on rescue missions and helped other toys that were in trouble. His stories were full of heroes and happy endings, and showed that despite everything he had been through, he still believed that good things happened to those who were brave and kind. As they listened to James's stories, William and Catherine began to understand that they were not just visitors bringing comfort to a sick child. They were students learning from a master teacher about courage, hope, and the power of keeping faith, even in the darkest times. This 5-year-old boy was showing them what it truly meant to be royal in the most important sense of the word. The nurses who had been watching from the doorway had to step away because they were crying too hard to maintain their professional composure. They had cared for James for many months and had grown to love him like their own child. Seeing him so happy and animated with his royal visitors was almost too wonderful to believe. Catherine made a decision in that moment that would surprise everyone, including herself. She was going to make a promise to this brave little boy that came straight from her heart and had nothing to do with royal protocol or official duties. Catherine looked at James playing with his toy cars and felt something powerful stirring in her heart. This little boy had touched her soul in a way that nothing else ever had, and she knew that she could not simply walk away and forget about him. The formal royal visit had become something much more personal and meaningful than anyone could have planned. Through her tears, Catherine leaned closer to James and spoke in a voice that was soft but full of determination. She told him that she and William wanted to make him a special promise that was just between the three of them. James looked up from his cars with curiosity and excitement, wondering what kind of promise a real princess might make to him. Catherine promised James that they would come back to visit him after he got his new heart and had his surgery. She said they wanted to be there to celebrate with him when he was feeling stronger and could show them how much better he was. The promise came from her heart and had nothing to do with any official royal duties or scheduled appearances. William was surprised by Catherine's promise, but immediately agreed with her decision. He nodded and told James that they would definitely return to see him and that they would bring him something very special when they came back. He promised to bring James a real prince's cape that he could wear while he was getting better and feeling stronger. James's eyes grew as big as saucers when he heard about the prince's cape. He asked if it would be red like the ones he had seen in storybooks, and if it would make him feel brave when he wore it. William smiled through his own tears and promised that the cape would be the most beautiful red color and that it would definitely help him feel even braver than he already was. The little boy was so excited about the promises that he started showing William and Catherine even more of his toy cars. He wanted them to meet every single car in his collection before they had to leave. He made them promise to remember each car so they could ask about them when they came back to visit him after his surgery. James's parents, Mark and Lisa, were overwhelmed by the kindness and genuine care that William and Catherine were showing their son. They had never expected that a royal visit would become so personal and meaningful. They could see that their son had made a real connection with these important people who truly cared about him as a person and not just as a patient they were visiting. Mitchell watched from the doorway as this extraordinary scene unfolded. In all her years of working at the hospital, she had never seen anything quite like this. The royal couple had completely forgotten about their formal schedule and were fully focused on this one special child who had captured their hearts so completely. Catherine continued to hold James's hand while they talked about his cars and his dreams for the future. She asked him what he wanted to do first when he got his new heart and felt strong again. James thought carefully about the question and then said he wanted to run in the park with his daddy and play on the swings like he used to do before he got sick. The simple wish to run and play like any normal child broke Catherine's heart even more. She realized how much this little boy had already sacrificed and how much he was still hoping to get back. His dreams were not about becoming famous or rich, but just about being able to be a regular kid again. William spent more time listening to James talk about his favorite cars and the adventures he imagined they went on. The little boy had created elaborate stories about how his cars helped other toys and always made sure everyone was safe and happy. Even in his imagination, James was thinking about helping others and making sure no one was left out or forgotten. As they prepared to eventually leave James's room, both William and Catherine knew that their lives had been changed forever by meeting this remarkable child. They had come to the hospital thinking they were going to bring comfort and joy to sick children, but instead they had received the greatest gift of all. They had learned what real courage looked like and what it meant to keep hoping even when everything seemed impossible. The promise they had made to James was not just words to make him feel better. It was a commitment that came from the deepest part of their hearts, and they both knew they would keep it no matter what happened. Word about what was happening in James's room spread quickly through the hospital corridors like ripples in a pond. Nurses and doctors who had been watching from a distance could see that something very special was taking place between the royal couple and the young patient. The formal royal visit had transformed into something much more personal and emotional than anyone had expected. Other families in the cardiac unit began to hear about how William and Catherine were spending so much time with James and showing such genuine care and interest in his story. Parents who had been keeping vigil beside their own sick children started to hope that maybe the royal couple would have time to meet their sons and daughters too. The hospital staff began quietly preparing other patients for possible visits. Mitchell realized that the original schedule for the day would have to be completely abandoned. William and Catherine were so emotionally invested in meeting these brave children that rushing them through formal introductions would not be right. She made the decision to let the royal couple take as much time as they needed with each family they encountered. When William and Catherine finally left James's room, they were approached by other families who had been waiting in the hallway. The parents looked tired and worried, but hopeful as they saw how much the royal couple had been affected by meeting James. They began sharing their own stories about their children's battles with serious heart conditions. 12-year-old Sarah was waiting for her second heart surgery after complications from her first operation. She had been at the hospital for 3 months and had missed most of her school year. When Catherine sat down to talk with her, Sarah explained how she was worried about falling behind her classmates and whether she would ever be able to catch up with her studies. Catherine listened carefully to Sarah's concerns and told her about how important education was, but that her health had to come first. She encouraged Sarah to ask her teachers for help when she was ready to return to school and assured her that most people would understand what she had been through and want to help her succeed. 16-year-old Michael had been born with a rare heart defect that had required multiple surgeries throughout his childhood. He was facing another operation that would hopefully be his last one. Michael was worried about whether he would ever be able to play sports or have a normal teenage life like his friends back home. William spent a long time talking with Michael about overcoming challenges and not letting fear control his decisions. He shared some of his own experiences with pressure and expectations and how he had learned to focus on what was most important. Michael seemed encouraged by William's honest words and practical advice about facing difficult situations. The parents of these children began opening up to William and Catherine about the emotional toll of watching their children suffer. They talked about sleepless nights spent worrying about their kids and the financial strain of being away from work for months at a time. They shared how their other children at home were also affected by having a sick sibling. One mother named Jennifer talked about how her 8-year-old son at home had started having nightmares about his little sister who was in the hospital. She explained how hard it was to divide her time between her sick daughter and her son, who also needed attention and reassurance. The whole family was struggling with the stress and uncertainty. Catherine and William listened to each story with complete attention and genuine compassion. They realized that serious childhood illness affected not just the patients but entire families who had to reorganize their whole lives around medical treatments and hospital stays. The ripple effects touched everyone connected to these brave children. Hospital staff members also began sharing their own experiences with William and Catherine. Nurses talked about how they dealt with the emotional challenges of caring for very sick children day after day. They explained how they found strength to continue their difficult work by witnessing the incredible courage shown by their young patients. Mitchell told them about how the medical team celebrated every small victory and milestone in each child's recovery. She explained that working in pediatric cardiology required not just medical expertise, but also the ability to maintain hope and provide emotional support to families during their darkest moments. As the afternoon continued, William and Catherine found themselves staying much longer than anyone had planned. They could not bring themselves to leave while there were still stories to hear and families who needed to feel heard and supported. Each conversation added another layer to their understanding of what these families were going through. The sun was beginning to set outside the hospital windows as William and Catherine finally made their way back toward the main entrance. Their visit, which was supposed to last 2 hours, had stretched into the entire afternoon because they could not bring themselves to leave, while there were still children to meet and families who needed their attention and support. As they walked down the same corridors they had entered earlier that day, both William and Catherine felt like completely different people than they had been that morning. The artwork on the walls that had impressed them when they arrived now seemed even more meaningful because they had met the brave young artists who had created each piece with their own hands. Their royal car was waiting outside just as it had been when they arrived, but everything else had changed in ways that could not be seen from the outside. The crowds of well-wishers were still there hoping to catch one more glimpse of the royal couple, but William and Catherine barely noticed the people or the cameras because their minds were still back inside the hospital with all the children they had met. They settled into the back seat of their car in complete silence, neither of them ready to put words to what they had experienced. The images and voices of the children they had met filled their thoughts and hearts. James asking if he could become a prince when he got his new heart. Emma explaining her rainbow of wishes for other sick children. Sarah worrying about her schoolwork, and Michael wondering if he would ever play sports again. Catherine reached for William's hand as their car pulled away from the hospital, and he squeezed it gently, understanding exactly what she was feeling without needing any words between them. They had both been profoundly changed by what they had witnessed and experienced during their visit. The courage and hope shown by children facing life-threatening illnesses had taught them lessons about what really mattered in life. William looked out the car window at the normal world going by and realized that most people had no idea what was happening inside that hospital every single day. Children were fighting battles that would challenge the strongest adults while maintaining smiles and dreams and hope for the future. Parents were sacrificing everything to be there for their sick kids while trying to keep their families together. Catherine thought about the promise she had made to James and knew with absolute certainty that they would keep it. They would return to visit him after his surgery, not because it was a royal duty, but because he had become important to them as a person. She also knew that this visit would change how they approached all of their future charitable work. As they rode through the London streets, both William and Catherine understood that their roles as members of the royal family had taken on a deeper meaning after today. They had always known that their position gave them opportunities to help people, but now they truly understood the responsibility that came with that privilege. Catherine whispered to William that she finally understood what it meant to serve others in the most meaningful way possible. It was not about showing up for photo opportunities or cutting ribbons at ceremonies. It was about genuinely caring for people who were going through difficult times and using their position to bring real comfort and hope. William nodded in agreement, knowing that their royal duties would never feel routine or ordinary again after what they had experienced. Every hospital visit and charity event would now remind them of the faces and voices of the children they had met today. They would carry James and Emma and all the other brave young patients in their hearts forever. They made a silent agreement between themselves that they would find ways to do more for families facing childhood illnesses. They would use their platform to raise awareness and funds for pediatric medical research. They would make sure that other people heard the stories of these incredible children and their families. The golden invitation that had arrived at Kensington Palace that morning had started as just another item on their royal schedule. But it had become the beginning of a new chapter in their lives as public servants who truly understood the power of human connection and compassion. As their car approached the palace gates, William and Catherine knew that they would never forget this day or the lessons they had learned from some of the smallest and bravest people they had ever met. Their hearts had been forever changed by children who had shown them what real courage looked like and what it meant to keep hoping even when everything seemed impossible.